Oh dear. The boss just stuck me in charge of driving this reactor. I only have a learner's permit. Should I honk the horn? Where's the horn anyway? Now, where's the brake pedal? Oh dear, where did they stick the turn signal?
Here's a dirty little secret the nuclear industry doesn't publicize. Over 100 million Americans live within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. Here another little inconvenient fact, the nuclear industry doesn't like to advertise. Did you know that a typical nuclear power reactor contains a lethal radioactive inventory far larger than that emitted by a large thermonuclear hydrogen bomb? That's right. There's far more radiation within a nuclear reactor than is emitted from a nuclear blast. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, or as it has sometimes been called, the Nuclear Rubber Stamp Commission, is charged with responsibility for protecting you, the public, from the threat of a nuclear nightmare. Yet, as we speak, the NRC is busy concocting a dangerous plan, one that 98% of the public has never heard of. A nuclear nonsense scandal, involving one of the greatest risks we face. A cover-up, so shocking that it's been dubbed NukeGate. Think it can't happen in today's world? Witness the indisputable facts, provided, courtesy the U.S. government itself. A cover-up that reeks of corruption, influence peddling, and back-scratching. Some aspects of the scandal we are about to document apply to the nuclear industry in other nations as well. But first, let's take a little look-see at what they just recently got away with.
Oh my god. What have I done? I pushed the meltdown button by mistake. I'm melting. I'm melting. I'm melting.
The operating licenses for the U.S. fleet of 100 nuclear power plants were approaching their 40-year limit. They would all be forced to close down unless these licenses were renewed. To appease powerful corporate interests, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, began a license renewal program to relicense these plants, extending their operational period by an additional 20 years from 40 years to 60 years. As required by law, NRC prepared an environmental impact statement, EIS, for each renewed plant license. Each of these EISs was required to rigorously scrutinize the impacts, so that the decision-maker and public could understand the increased risk each plant posed over the additional 20-year operating period. This process is intended to allow us to make wiser decisions. As you are about to see, this is precisely what NRC failed to do. According to NRC's website, Mr. Brian Holian was placed in charge of this relicensing program. Mr. Holian placed Mr. Pham in charge of managing and approving EISs, prepared for each renewed license. NukeGate refers to NRC's false and faked EIS and relicensing process. It was a sham from the get-go, designed to give the appearance that the entire process was safe and harmless. What follows is based on the NRC's own published documents and the indisputable facts. To understand the gravity of NukeGate, keep this little gem in the back of your mind. Engineers at a scientific conference were asked to rate the gravest technological risks. A major nuclear accident, such as a full-scale nuclear reactor meltdown, was rated number 2 out of a list of 25 major risks, yet as you are about to see, NRC denied there was any serious risk to worry about. Let me repeat that one more time. NRC denied there was any serious nuclear risks for us to worry about. Nuclear nonsense. NRC's nuclear cover-up. NRC simply denied that a nuclear apocalyptic nightmare was anything to worry about. How did they pull that off? Simple. With a single 30-word dismissal sentence, and we quote.
The probability-weighted consequences of atmospheric releases, fallout onto open bodies of water, releases to groundwater, and societal and economic impacts from severe accidents are small for all plants.
Huh?
Small? The risk of a catastrophic nuclear accident is small? Recall that 100 million Americans live within 50 miles of a major nuclear power reactor. Recall that engineers attending a conference rated nuclear power reactors as the second highest risk that society faces. Recall that a nuclear reactor contains far more radioactivity than a thermonuclear bomb. Yet, NRC had the audacity to tell us that the risk of a nuclear accident, such as a full-scale nuclear meltdown, is small. That's right. With one simple, dismissal sentence, NRC swept the entire threat under the rug. How stupid do they think we are? A life-threatening event, such as a full-scale nuclear meltdown, demanded a thorough and detailed assessment, 100 pages or more in length, devoted to the assessment of the cataclysmic nuclear consequences. This is necessary, so that the decision-maker and public can understand the full extent of the threat before a decision is made to grant an extended operating license. But instead, they gave us a fake 30-word dismissal sentence. Supposedly, NRC devoted Chapter 5 of the EIS to the subject of accidents. But on closer inspection, it was a cover-up. The actual assessment of nuclear consequences was limited to this single 30-word sentence, essentially assuring us that we have nothing to seriously worry about. The rest of Chapter 5 was window dressing, a camouflage smokescreen, which intentionally avoided any discussion of the cataclysmic environmental, safety, and health consequences. Such a silly denial is so phony, it stretches scientific imagination, and government transparency and integrity to its limits. As just witnessed, an EIS must fully and rigorously evaluate impacts, dangers, and alternatives for mitigating impacts like major nuclear accidents. In the words of one court, an EIS is to, and we quote, leave no stone unturned. So, did NRC do this? No. Not at all. Their EIS assessments didn't so much as include a single word devoted to crucial environmental, health, or safety threats resulting from a major nuclear accident such as a full-scale meltdown. Not a single sentence devoted to mind-numbing consequences of an accident such as thousands of deaths, thousands of cancers, cancer and birth defects, injuries, destroyed property values, evacuated cities, permanently quarantined, radiatively contaminated, sacrifice zones, or mass panic and hysteria that would ensue. This laundry list goes on and on. They completely scuttled the assessment of the single most significant threat posed by a nuclear reactor, a major accident. As one critic termed it, it was an aborted assessment. But it gets worse. NRC cleverly concealed many other serious issues, which are discussed in related videos, because they are simply too numerous to describe in this video. This was the case for each and every one of the 100 renewed licenses. But how do we explain such dangerous approvals? Two possibilities come to mind. Either Mr. Holian and Mr. Pham did not understand the true threats, or they understood the threats, yet approved these deceitful EISs anyway. There are troubling implications with either explanation. 1. If they approved these flawed assessments, not understanding the true nature of the threats, they were guilty of sheer scientific incompetency, or 2. If they understood the threats, but approved these deceitful assessments anyway, they were complicit in a gross cover-up.
In a state of disbelief? Simply consult Chapter 5 in any one of NRC's relicensing EISs and see for yourself. Simply contact the NRC and ask them for assistance in obtaining a free copy of one of their license renewal EISs. Read it for yourself. NRC's public document room phone number is 1-800-397-4209. You can also lodge a concern. NRC's safety and security concern phone number is 1-800-695-7403.
This is an abbreviated copy of the public notice, signed by Mr. Pham, approving the issuance of one of NRC's relicensing EISs. Carefully examine the second paragraph of this abbreviated notice, and we quote:
The staff has determined that the adverse impacts of license renewal for KPS, Kewaunee Nuclear Plant, are not great enough to deny the option of license renewal for energy planning decision makers.
Huh?
It essentially declares that the relicensed plant poses no serious threat. But how would NRC know this for sure? After all, they never performed an assessment of impacts that would result from a nuclear accident. If no assessment of the impacts was performed, then NRC has no basis for concluding that the impacts are essentially harmless. No reasonable scientist or member of the public believes such half-baked denials. No wonder this relicensing program has been coined by the appropriate term: NukeGate.
Eeks. Oh shit. That's unbelievable.
In the end, not a single one of the 100 nuclear reactor license applications were denied. How did they get away with this farce? They kept the entire program low-keyed. In fact, 99% of the public wasn't even aware of NRC's relicensing program. Even fewer saw through NRC's smokescreen.
It's not a lie if you believe it. Want a donut?
When the nuclear nonsense gets higher and deeper. Get ready. Welcome to NukeGate 2.0. As we speak, NRC is quietly, hard at work, pursuing what may be their next fake process. This time they call it by the innocuous-sounding title, Subsequent License Renewal or SLR. Sounds rather innocuous, doesn't it? Yes, having just completed its deceptive relicensing program, NRC is now plotting a subsequent program to extend the licenses for these increasingly dangerous plants even further, this time from 60 to a full 80 years. Have you ever even heard of the SLR program? No? And NRC plans to keep it under the public radar, just as they did with the last license renewal program. NRC plans to start preparing their subsequent relicensing and accompanying plant-specific EISs in the near future. Simply Google the phrase, subsequent license renewal, and see for yourself. But here is where the story becomes more bewildering. Guess who NRC placed in charge of this new subsequent license renewal, SLR, program? Mr. Pham, the same manager who supervised and approved the deceptive 30-word declaration, denying there was anything to be seriously concerned about. NRC is playing with fire.
Huh?
By the way, where's NRC's programmatic EIS, PEIS, for this subsequent license renewal program? Are they hiding again? The EIS regulations and a number of courts have ordered preparation of a programmatic EIS, PEIS, for programs having national implications. A purpose of a programmatic EIS is to assess an entire national program, at its early decision-making phase, to determine if it is
even a wise idea. Allow the public to provide input into the shaping the course of the program, and to determine the optimum path forward, which in this case, might actually involve alternatives such as shutting the entire nuclear fleet down, and instead shifting resources to a national program such as renewable energy.
Let's take a moment to look at why NRC is required to prepare programmatic EIS for its SLR program. As an integral part of the programmatic EIS process, NRC would be required to solicit public input on the entire program, including whether they should even move forward or pursue a different course of action with respect to energy generation. If the programmatic EIS leads to a decision to move forward with the SLR program, then NRC would be required to prepare plant-specific EISs for each subsequent license renewal. Here are the regulatory requirements proving that NRC is required to prepare programmatic EIS for its SLR program. These requirements are taken directly out of the NEPA regulations governing the preparation of EISs, provided in 40 Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, sections 1500 to 1508. We will now consider the first requirement, governing preparation of a programmatic EIS. As stated in 40 CFR section 1502.4, subsection B, a programmatic EIS is needed for, and we quote, broad federal actions such as the adoption of new agency programs. It refers to two key criteria: broad actions and programs. Note the term, broad federal action. The SLR is, by any measure, an initiative of national scope, potentially encompassing the entire U.S. fleet of commercial power reactors. It is, therefore, a broad federal action of national concern. But the SLR is also a national program to once again extend the operational period of the nation's nuclear power reactors. Thus, SLR constitutes a broad national program. This programmatic EIS criterion is therefore triggered. Now, we will consider a second requirement, found in 40 CFR section 1502.4, subsection B. This regulatory provision involves the issue of timing, which states, and we quote, agencies shall prepare statements on broad actions so that they are relevant to policy and are timed to coincide with meaningful points in agency planning and decision-making. Note, the phrase, and we quote, timed to coincide with meaningful points in agency planning and decision-making. This means that the programmatic EIS must be issued before any plant-specific relicensing EISs are prepared, and therefore before any subsequent licenses renewals are granted. This means the programmatic EIS must be started now so that it coincides with the point in which NRC would begin preparation of the actual relicensing EISs. We will now consider this timing requirement in a little more detail. 40 Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, Section 1508.23, provides specific criteria for determining when an agency must begin preparation of an EIS for a federal proposal, also referred to as a proposed action. Note that a proposal can exist, even if the agency has not officially declared one to exist. We will now look at whether the SLR has matured to the stage, constituting a proposal, at which time the NRC must begin preparation of its programmatic EIS. 40 CFR Section 1508.23 establishes three criteria for determining when a proposal exists. For the purposes of an EIS, a proposal exists at that stage in the development of an action when an agency
has a goal, is actively preparing to make a decision on one or more alternative means of accomplishing that goal, and the effects can be meaningfully evaluated.
Let's examine each of these three criteria and see if they have, in fact, already been triggered. If they have, SLR has reached the proposal stage that demands preparation of a programmatic EIS. We will now consider each of these three criteria for determining when a proposal exists. Criteria number 1, the NRC has clearly signaled its intention to move forward with the SLR program. It has announced its intent on its website. It has established a department that is now hard at work, developing direction for the SRL program. Hence it has a clear goal. Thus, the first criterion is triggered. Criteria number 2, because the NRC has already instituted studies and issued SLR reports, it is clearly preparing to make a decision regarding SLR. Thus, the second criterion is triggered. Criteria number 3, because the NRC has already instituted studies and issued SLR reports, the effects of this program can be meaningfully evaluated at a programmatic level, including programmatic alternatives to the SLR program. Thus, this, the third and final criterion, is triggered. All three proposal criteria have been triggered. Thus, a proposal exists, and is already witnessed. a programmatic EIS needs to be prepared so that it is, and we quote the provision again, time to coincide with meaningful points in agency planning and decision-making. In conclusion, the EIS regulatory requirements, including all three criteria for determining when a proposal exists, have been triggered. Therefore, the SRL constitutes a federally proposed program, even if it has not formally been declared by NRC to be a proposed program. NRC needs to begin preparation of a programmatic EIS immediately. This includes obtaining input, comments, and direction from the public and outside experts. It also forces the NRC, in full public review, to consider the wisdom of moving forward with such a potentially dangerous program. And this time around, don't let them get away with concluding that the risk of a full-scale nuclear meltdown is small. Note that NRC plans to prepare what is referred to as a generic EIS, or GEIS, for this supplemental relicensing program. A purpose of a programmatic is distinctly different. The generic EIS simply evaluates and categorizes generic impacts and issues that are common to most nuclear reactors. A programmatic EIS is much broader and more encompassing than a generic EIS. Unlike a generic EIS, a programmatic EIS is intended to establish a national nuclear policy and strategy, which includes shutting down certain dangerous reactor designs or even retiring the entire fleet of nuclear reactors. It might even have to consider the alternative of transitioning from nuclear energy to renewable energy. Instead of simply preparing site-specific EISs for renewing individual plant licenses, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would, for the first time, be obligated to consider the wisdom of their entire license renewal program. You can bet, this is the last thing the Nuclear Regulatory Commission wants to publicly discuss. Don't accept any lame excuse that their generic EIS satisfies the requirement of preparing a programmatic EIS. Welcome to NRC's website. Ironically, after their management went to great lengths to hide life-threatening nuclear safety issues from us, NRC has the audacity to wish us a happy and safe new year. Now you understand why NRC's first relicensing program was given the aptly deserved name NukeGate. The most dangerous gate ever perpetrated on the public. Will NRC make the same deceitful claims in their new SLR program, NukeGate 2.0? As just witnessed, NRC never prepared a programmatic EIS for its first relicensing program, which was just recently completed. Why? The last thing they did was to alert the public by placing their relicensing program in the national spotlight. They got away with it. Why? Because at the time, few knew what they were up to, and even fewer knew about the programmatic EIS requirement. NRC simply avoided preparing one, because no one challenged them in court. Don't let them get away with it a second time around. The time to act is now. Demand that they begin preparation of a programmatic EIS immediately. Expect them to do everything under the sun to avoid preparing one. They may deny that the SLR is a program, or deny that a formal proposal exists, or even insist that their generic EIS satisfies the programmatic requirement. Don't believe such nuclear nonsense. You've just seen the evidence that directly contradicts such claims. Don't accept any cockamamie denial that they don't need to prepare one. They are legally obligated to prepare one and engage the public. If they refuse to immediately initiate preparation of a programmatic EIS, you, the public, the states, and environmental organizations can file a lawsuit, forcing them to do so. Congress can also direct them to prepare one. Send this link to those you know. Contact environmental organizations and Congress and share this link with them. Demand that NRC follow the law and immediately begin preparation of a programmatic EIS. Goodbye, my friends, and stay safe.
For more information, contact organizations such as Union of Concerned Scientists, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Friends of the Earth, and Congress. Demand transparency and accountability. Contact your congressional office and demand an investigation. To obtain a copy of a relicensing EIS, contact NRC's Public Document Room. Their phone number is 1-800-397-4209. To lodge a complaint with the NRC, contact NRC's Safety and Security Concerns. Their phone number is 1-800-695-7403. Or contact the NRC Chairman, Christine Elsvenicki. Her NRC email is chairman@nrc.gov. For additional information on the programmatic EIS requirement, see the NEPA Implementing Regulations, 40 Code of Federal Regulations, Sections 1502.4b, 1500.4i, and 1502.1.